Good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is our second installment of a three-part series called Untapped Talent, Diversifying through Fair Chance Hiring. We have a wonderful show scheduled for you today. Before we start, I'd like to thank our esteemed partners and the people responsible for putting this webinar together. First, we have Checkr, a background check company in San Francisco, California. We have California Community College Rising Scholars Network, the CROP Organization, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and the Bay Area Community College Consortium. So this morning, we're blessed to have a colleague, a friend, somebody who's leading the conversation in this space, a thought leader, Dr. Lucretia Murphy from Jobs for the Future, also known as JFF. And we'll be introducing her to talk a little bit about fair chance talent, untapped talent, and why this work is important to her. Lucretia, are you here?
I am, Ken. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
And good afternoon. I'm on the East Coast, so a little bit ahead of you all, and I can tell you it's going to be a great day when you get into the future. And I am so grateful and thank you to Ken and Damini for inviting me to be with you all today. My name, as Ken said, is Lucretia Murphy. I'm a senior director at Jobs for the Future. For those of you who don't know us, Jobs for the Future is a national intermediary. We work nationally with stakeholders like you all to advance equity and economic mobility for both young people and adults. And our big focus, and that's why this work is so important to us, is really what does it take to dismantle the barriers to equity and mobility, but more importantly, what does it take to create the future that we'd like to see? And I think that fair chance hiring really embodies this, because it is about dismantling those barriers to access, those barriers to advancement and employment, also really dismantling the narratives that create barriers, the narratives that say people with records are permanent criminals, criminals are dangerous to our economy, criminals are dangerous in our workplace, really taking the people and the talent out of the hiring. And so we really want to dismantle on both the work piece and those narrative pieces. And we just think it's a win-win. And I know you all will talk about this, obviously, with Checkr, that when you have fair chance hiring in place, and we like to think of it as both the access piece, actually people getting into the jobs, but the advancement piece as well, people having the opportunity to grow in their professional goals and their professional development, to set a new economic trajectory for themselves. But it's also really, really important, I think, to give people these mobility opportunities so there can be a real distinction between being home and being free, and having the freedom really to set a course for their future, to sustain themselves and their families. We also think that fair chance hiring is a win for employers, right? It creates a pipeline of people who are talented, who can make a contribution to the organization. But it also pushes organizations to really rethink how they operate, to create really more equitable and inclusive work environments. And we know those are associated with much more higher performing organizations. And then this becomes a win for individuals in society as well. And I know if any of you have heard Ken talk about this, he speaks so eloquently about the ability to just really actualize themselves as full citizens. What does it mean when society really puts up barriers? Is that we don't have all the talent that citizens can bring to our country, to our communities, to build up and really be change agents for all the things that we know we want to change in society. And so one of the things that we're really excited to work on with colleagues like CROP, with colleagues like Checkr, is really thinking about what does it mean when networks of employers are really willing to take the lead and scale these opportunities for fair chance hiring, for access, for advancement for people, and also redesigning how their organizations work to be more equitable and inclusive. And then also thinking about what kind of policies need to be in place for these to last. At JFF, we've been thinking about policies for equitable economic recovery that focus on helping people rebound and advance, really revitalizing regional economies so that good jobs exist for people to take advantage of, and then redesigning education and workforce development systems so that they're actually set up to be equitable and actually set up to really be forces of inclusion, and not just creating more barriers for people to jump through. And we like to really think about how this framework can be useful, right, for incentivizing changes that help people in place, but also really changes that enable institutions and organizations to make systemic change. So I think what's so exciting about these conversations that you all are having is it's not just about the aspiration, it's about the action as well. And so we look really forward to partnering with you all, but to hearing the conversations today. And just as a little plug for another conversation you may want to join, JFF is hosting a national summit where these conversations will also be able to continue. And that will be in I guess it'll be virtual. I was going to say in New Orleans, which is really where we usually have it, but that won't happen this year. I forgot. So it's going to be Zoom, June 15th through June 16th. It's called Horizons 2021. I will put the link that we have right now. It's more of a skeleton in the chat, just so Damini and Ken can keep this group connected to that, but also, we'll send out more information so you all can join us there and keep these great conversations going. So again, thanks for inviting me. I'm happy, really looking forward to being here for the conversation. And we also have an office in Oakland. Here's another advertisement. So look for JFF Oakland, because that's another team of people that would like to be connected to this work.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. JFF, their conference every year in Horizons. I'll just give a second plug. I attended last year. Wonderful conference. For those of you who don't know, I would encourage you to look up their website. They're one of the leading workforce think tanks in the country. And Dr. Murphy does great work in reference to Fair Chance Talent. So I would encourage you to look them up and support the great work that they do across the country by attending the Horizons conference. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about how to be a fair chance employer. I talk to a lot of companies every day, as I know other people do, like Damani and others. And one of the great mysteries is, how do you convince employers to hire fair chance talent? I think one of the leading companies in the country that I'm familiar with that's been leading the work for the last 5 years is Checkr, who've been very intentional about creating spaces for people who have been justice involved. And I'll let Lauren Bell, who's the fair chance manager, talk about the work that they do. Lauren.
Thank you so much, Ken, and good morning, everybody. First of all, I definitely want to give a strong thanks to Damani for your leadership on this series and just bringing together such a rock star team of people. It's been awesome to work with everybody. And Dr. Lucretia, I also wanted to thank you for being here over the past couple of months. It's been incredible to learn from you and to just gain insights from you. Your comments about creating equitable solutions, a lot of what I want to talk about this morning is the very clear and critical role that businesses can play and should play in creating equitable solutions. So I'm going to take some time this morning to talk about how you can become a fair chance employer, or even double down on your efforts if you already are a fair chance employer. Next slide, please. Oh. Do we have the slide deck up? Perfect. Thanks so much, Carrie. So we are on slide number 2. Perfect. Goals of today are very simple. They are curiosity for those that are new to fair chance hiring. I hope today's session will make you more curious about practices, commitment. For those of you who are already fair chance employers, that maybe today you'll start committing to actually setting a fair chance hiring goal. Ken really pushes all of us in this direction. Businesses should be committing 1%, 2%, 3% or more of your talent and hiring people who are formerly incarcerated. And here's what you can expect from the presentation: a brief overview of Checkr, what it means to be a fair chance employer, really a call to action. And then, of course, the nuts and bolts, how to become a fair chance employer. Since we don't have a ton of time this morning and I have a decent amount of content, I'm really going to plant some seeds along the way. So please do ask us questions. Next slide. So a little bit about Checkr. We are a fair chance mission-driven background check company. We have headquarters in San Francisco and Denver and are a team of nearly 500 people. We have around 30,000 customers across the country. At first blush, it might sound a little weird for a background check company to be so driven by fairness in hiring, but a quick look below the surface and it really does make a lot of sense. We make sure customers get information quickly and efficiently, and we also commit to ensuring that a record isn't a barrier to professional success. Checkr is actually in a great position to support customers and job seeker needs. Next slide. We did not start off as a mission-driven company. Our founders, Daniel and Jonathan, entered the background space because they wanted to bring innovation to an antiquated industry. And they did this through creating technology that integrates artificial intelligence and machine learning, and they were really successful. But in the process, Checkr also recognized firsthand the impact of background checks on job seekers with conviction histories. Early on, Daniel talked to a lot of job seekers and a lot of people in the community and learned about ambitious, hardworking people and parents who were being turned away because of their records. Job seekers talked about record inaccuracies and the impacts of old records on their job search and records that were really irrelevant to the job. So Daniel and Jonathan wanted to build a best-in-class company, but they didn't want to harm hardworking people in the process. So to uproot or address this harm, they committed to fairness in hiring and built a fair chance mission into our model. Next slide. And our mission keeps growing. It is deeply threaded throughout our business. Our product and engineering teams are really passionate about the products that they build. They blend security, trust, and fairness. Our products are really where we scale the greatest fair chance impact. In 2020, we exceeded our goal of unblocking 1 million people, and we unblocked 1.5 million people to employment. This accomplishment was the result of Checkr and our customers actually working together to unblock candidates who were previously ineligible for job consideration simply due to records that were irrelevant to the roles. In 2021, we are doubling down to unblock 3 million people. Our mission is also backed up by our commitment to fair chance hiring. We set an annual metric. In 2021, our metric is 5.5%. Currently, around 4% of our company are people who have criminal records. And our full-time, fair chance talent has a 75% retention rate, a 54% promotion rate, and a 100% engagement rate. Our talent is staying and growing at Checkr, and they're building more than a job. As Lucretia said, they are building careers and rebuilding a life for themselves. Next slide. So what does it mean to be a fair chance employer? In part, it really means recognizing that the United States has a really severe mass incarceration problem. The stats on this slide won't be new to many of you, but for all of us, it should truly be a call to action. 1 in 3 people, as we know, in the United States has a criminal record, and 19 million people have felonies. Across the country, there are a ridiculous number, 48,000 federal, state, and local civil laws and regulations that curtail liberties and somebody's ability to earn a living. Formerly incarcerated people have an unemployment rate that is 5 times higher than people without a record. And we know that our Black and Latinx communities are disproportionately impacted by this overcriminalization. These failed policies have absolutely resulted in an untapped labor pool that is technically disenfranchised. And by this, I mean the talent isn't lacking. Mental, cognitive, emotional commitment to working hard and living the American dream. It means that failed policies are keeping a huge group of people in technical limbo, and like a force field is keeping them at a distance from professional success. And so businesses, with our spirit, our grit, our innovation, our determination and ambition, should feel this kind of technical restraint to our core. And businesses should step up. We should name the mass incarceration problem and commit to helping to mitigate it. At the end of the day, it's what is there to lose? Fair chance practices don't require that we hire someone in particular. They require a commitment to fairness, to ensuring that a criminal record alone isn't the reason a great candidate is overlooked for a job. We have so much to gain in fair chance hiring. Next slide. Being a fair chance employer also recognizes that the very system that creates technical restraints on somebody's success also stigmatizes people for not succeeding. News and mass media serve as the primary source of information for almost 95% of the public. And I read one study that said that news outlets actually devote roughly 50% of their coverage to crime, and that more often than not, the story's aim is to invoke fear and point to one option: harsher punishments. This isn't to say that public safety isn't of critical importance. Incidents like the one that just happened yesterday in Colorado, last week in Georgia, incidents that happened to Breonna Taylor, to George Floyd, they all must be rightfully addressed. The system needs to hold people accountable and justice needs to be served. But in the process, we have to challenge our belief systems and not paint every person with a criminal record or who has been to prison with a broad stroke. The news is great at making society extremely ambivalent about fair chance hiring. We can balance accountability and justice with fairness and opportunities, and we must be intentional about challenging mainstream media and the status quo. Next slide. Being a fair chance employer also means getting proximate to the struggles and successes of people who are formerly incarcerated, and in so doing, getting proximate to real solutions. We all, or so many of us, we all should know of Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Institute. He said it best about proximity. Proximity has taught me some basic and humbling truths, including this vital lesson: each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. His work with the poor and the incarcerated has persuaded him that the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. So getting proximate means getting more or better information. It also means actively engaging with formerly incarcerated people who are the keys to fair chance hiring solutions. This slide includes a lot of information. I want to highlight the middle column. It includes a short list of some of Checkr's most valued mission partners. Our proximity to our partners results in thought leadership, communities of practice, consultancy on our fair chance projects, and a pipeline of talent into Checkr jobs. There are so many ways to get proximate. Reach out to your communities as a first step. Next slide, please. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes planting some seeds for what you, the aspiring fair chance employer, can include in a developing fair chance hiring plan. The suggestions are grouped along some of the traditional points on the recruitment and hiring spectrum. So as mentioned, we don't have a ton of time this morning. And excuse me, I was just getting straight on my slides here. I'm going to spend the next few minutes planting some seeds for what you, the aspiring fair chance employer, can include in your hiring plan. The suggestions are grouped along some of the traditional points on the recruitment and hiring spectrum. Next slide. Thank you so much for your help, Carrie. As mentioned, since we don't have a ton of time this morning, I'm just going to plant some seeds. For more comprehensive details on how to become a fair chance employer, I encourage you to check out the resources listed on this slide. We'll provide this information on a resource list that we send out to all attendees. Next slide. At the foundation of being a fair chance employer are the laws that protect job seekers and employers. For those that joined our first session, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition did a fantastic presentation on the mechanics behind fair chance laws. This morning, I'm going to give just an abbreviated overview and drill down on a specific part of the law, the nature time nature test. There are a lot of comments from businesses about liabilities with hiring people with conviction histories. Our research points to greater liabilities in lawsuits when businesses don't follow guidance created by the EEOC, Ban the Box, and Fair Chance. Ban the Box laws initiated by Dorsey Nunn of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, who's pictured on the slide, was the revolutionary who changed the game for the hiring of people with conviction histories. When LSPC's work started, job and housing applications literally still read, "People with felonies need not apply." LSPC's work influenced the EEOC's federal guidance in 2012 and has influenced all local, state, and federal Fair Chance Acts that have been passed since. There are currently 35 states, DC, and over 150 cities and counties that have adopted Fair Chance policies, but we need more. There are jurisdictional differences in the policies across the country. And since most people on the call today are from California, I'm just going to remind people about the main points of California's Fair Chance Act. Next slide. With very few exceptions, the California Fair Chance Act requires a conditional offer of employment before a background check can be conducted. It prohibits consideration of things like arrests and dismissed or expunged convictions. It requires a nature test be completed when an offer of employment will be revoked due to a criminal record. It requires that when an applicant's conditional offer may be revoked, that the applicant get written notice from the employer, a copy of the background check, and be allowed 5 days to respond with additional information. Best practices also include a panel or individualized assessment of the background check, nature findings, and additional information submitted during the 5-day response period. Denial of a job would indicate that there is a clear and reasonable nexus between the job and the conviction. Next slide. Next, we're going to take a couple minutes to do a somewhat interactive exercise to explore the importance of the nature test and individualized assessment. So here's what we're going to do. The next couple of slides present a hypothetical job candidate and job, as well as some conviction history information. You are going to put on your hiring hat. You're going to conduct some virtual due diligence, and you're going to make a hiring decision this morning. So take a moment to remind yourself of the nature test that is on the slide. You're looking at the gravity of the offense, when it was committed, and if there is a nexus to the job. Okay, let's get started. On the next slide is our hypothetical job seeker. BB is 32 and applied to be a retail associate at a popular retail brand. The job requirements include receiving and stocking merchandise, working with an inventory system, and engaging with customers in person and on the phone. After applying, BB was extended a conditional offer of employment. And following, the employer was able to run the background check. Next slide, please. When BB's background check was run, a questionable record surfaced. You, as the employer, will now engage in the nature test to determine if you are going to give BB the job or revoke your conditional offer of employment. Can folks see that? Can folks see this slide okay? Thumbs up. Okay. So take a moment to run the test. What do you see on the record? What is the nature? What is the gravity of the offense? A simple assault and battery. Some people with adjudication teams, they might know if this is a felony or a misdemeanor. A smaller employer might question, is this a felony or a misdemeanor? And then the time, when did this happen? It's happened in 2009, which is quite a long time ago. And then what is the nature of the offense? What is the nature of the job? And is there a nexus between this conviction and the job? There could be, but is it a strong enough nexus? So what are you going to do? A decision needs to be made. Would you hire this person for the job? If people feel comfortable enough, you can feel free to put some comments in the chat. Next slide, please. From a nature test, BB should have been hired for the job, but it is likely that in many places across the country that BB wouldn't have been hired. There are only 7 states in our country that use a 7-year look-back rule, meaning there are only 7 states where an employer can only consider criminal history within the last 7 years. In most parts of the country, this conviction could prevent this candidate from getting a job. The reality is that there was no related risk. As you can see from the slide, there is more to the story. BB's conviction was the result of a bar tussle, and BB actually attempted to protect other patrons from harm. In theory, BB displayed the kind of business and patron loyalty and protection that one values. A core lesson here is that a background check can only tell part of the story. Best practices like the nature test and individualized assessment can go a long way in helping you get the best candidate for a position. Next slide, please. So this experience of BB's application and job search is not a far-fetched one. There are many workforce experts on the call who work regularly with great candidates who are getting turned down for jobs because of their record alone. Simply through hiring, businesses can make a profound impact. Next slide. So as a fair chance employer who is developing a fair chance hiring plan, inevitably you will ask a question about recruitment. Many businesses will say there is no pipeline, and this is simply not correct. There is an untapped talent pipeline, and to access it, you just need to collaborate with workforce partners and be creative about how to strengthen the pipeline of qualified candidates. This could mean coaching some partners or applicants on your interview process, or collaborating with partners to offer a training program. In the last year, my colleagues at Checkr collaborated with Defy Ventures, a mission partner, on a small career readiness training program. Most participants were people who had served decades in prison and were out for 3, 6 months, or just a year. And a credit to them and Defy's work, nearly everyone in the class is working at least one job. Many people are working several. This year, Checkr is also partnering with the Crop organization on their soon to be launched Ready for Life program. Our sales team will provide hard skills, tech skills training to these participants. Next slide. Your fair chance employment effort will also have you think critically about your hiring practices. In addition to the best practice considerations that we've already addressed, I encourage you to look beyond the golden resume. Some fair chance candidates will have requisite educational and professional backgrounds listed. They will have the professional background that you listed in your job description, but many won't. Instead, review resumes and candidates through the lens of whether or not the candidate has the right skill match for the job. Talk with your mission partner about the candidate's strength and potential. Next slide. And finally, include retention strategies early on in your planning process. Consider the unique circumstances of somebody who has been through the criminal justice system. Some people may still be on probation and parole. Support a schedule that ensures that they can be compliant with their supervision requirements. Understand that some people may need more ramp-up time. Some people entered prison without having any digital literacy skills. Others are being released after long periods of time and still lack those digital literacy skills. So create opportunities for G Suite, MacBook, Slack, or Microsoft Basics trainings. And lastly, and importantly, enforce an inclusive environment. This means things like requiring people first language, making references to a person who is formerly incarcerated or a returning citizen. Eliminate words like ex-felon, ex-con, and inmate from your business culture. Create opportunities for your teams to learn more about the criminal justice system and mass incarceration. Create a community of people that is dedicated to advancing your fair chance strategies. Next slide. And finally, in closing, the nonprofit and public sectors have been champions of fair chance for so long, and they have been shouldering the work and doing an amazing job. They've opened doors to fair chance hiring for all of us, but it is time for businesses to embrace more fair chance responsibility. So let's roll up our sleeves, get proximate, and get to work. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Lauren. Everybody give it up for Lauren. Great presentation. We appreciate you. I had one question, Lauren, that I saw come through the chat a little bit earlier. If you don't mind taking a question, are you open to that?
Of course.
Sure. I just want to reiterate and have you reiterate the work that you did last summer with the How to Become a Fair Chance Hire playbook. And maybe you can share with the audience, people who haven't accessed that resource, the work that you did there and why it's important that they get that from the Checkr website.
Thanks so much, Ken. Yeah, so Checkr invested a lot of time and resources to touch back on the slide about proximity. We reached out to leaders like Ken, to Defy, to CEO, to Dave's Killer Bread, to develop an e-playbook that is really a step-by-step process for becoming a fair chance employer. It is available for free on Checkr's website. If you just do a simple Google search for Checkr Fair Chance Playbook, it'll come right up. And again, it walks you through the steps, many of the steps that were discussed this morning, but really gives you a step ahead in launching your Fair Chance program. So it's a great resource. I also put up a slide earlier with other resources from SHRM. And then I don't know how public it is, but Dave's Killer Bread, right, has another
Sure.
developing employer development program that I can't wait to see.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Lauren. We appreciate you, and we appreciate all the work that Checkr does as being leaders in this space. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the work that Checkr's put down the last 5 years. So thank you again. Up next, we have a very exciting guest, Jeff Corzanick, who's written a book that's set to come out in April called Untapped Talent: How Second Chance Hiring Works for Your Business and the Community. What's really interesting to me, I've had the privilege and honor to see Jeff speak and do a presentation, is for the first time, someone has written a book about the business case and the investment case for why businesses across the country need to invest in fair chance talent. So it's not just us progressives who are trying to convince employers every day about it's the right thing to do. There's actually a bottom line case. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Corzanick. Jeffrey, you're on.
Thanks so much, Ken, and hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on. I'm not sure an economist banker has ever been introduced as exciting before, so thanks for that first, Ken. I'm going to step back. You've heard a lot about the societal benefits of doing this and how returning citizens and justice-involved individuals, as I also like to say, it can not only be good employees, but good friends as well, and humanizing their struggles and understanding their potential as human beings is really critical. But I'm going to step back, and if I can, I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about the big picture economically. And I know no one said there was going to be math in this, and there's going to be some charts and some math, but please bear with me, because I think it's an important aspect of understanding why all of us will benefit from a more prosperous economy, and a more prosperous economy depends on being able to bring marginalized workers into lives of contribution and meaning. And that means that we have to start by asking ourselves where growth comes from. And for all you hear about economics, you may see in the paper or hear on the news of economic releases, over the long term, growth potential of any economy boils down to only two things. How fast can you grow your workforce, and how fast can you grow their productivity? The chart you see here, and again, I know not everyone's a chart person, so bear with me. We get this data from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Each decade or period of time, it's not, each one is not quite a decade, but each period reflects the growth in those periods and to what degree labor force growth contributed to growth, and to what degree productivity contributed to growth. And you'll see back in the 50s to the 70s, and then again in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we were growing at better than 3%. But our growth has been weaker. And in fact, if you look at that far right-hand column, the CBO projects our growth going forward on average will be less than 2%. That's paltry growth, and it's not in any of our interests. For one, if you're growing at less than 2%, it's all too easy to fall back into a recession. For another, we know from experience that more robust growth lifts up not just individuals, but whole communities as we become a more inclusive economy. But we have a problem. And you'll see that problem is represented by that green bar, and you'll see it's been trending lower and lower. Our growth potential as an economy has been constrained by demographic forces. Birth rates in the United States peaked cyclically in 1990. Since then, we've had a pretty steady decline in birth rates. And if you look moving forward at US fertility rates, how many children an average woman would have over her lifespan, we're not even replacing our whole population. So if it weren't for immigration, we could even see that green bar grow negative, dragging down growth further. Well, when you're in this situation, you have to dig deeper into your existing population and make sure that everyone who is willing and able to work has the opportunity to be employed. Economists talk about this measure, labor force participation rate. What percentage of your adult non-institutionalized population is in the workforce, actively looking for employment or actually employed? You can see in this chart goes back to 1948. And again, I realize not everyone's a chart person, but see that rising line from the 60s through the 90s. That was when we had a greater and greater percentage of our population was in the workforce. It was associated with much more rapid levels of growth. It was part of the good news. The secret sauce to our strong growth and this labor force participation was both the baby boomers coming of working age, but also critically, the inclusion of women to a greater and greater degree in the workforce. But by 2000, we started to decline. And this decline is one of the major reasons we've had weaker and weaker growth, structural growth in the US economy. Our growth potential has been declining because of a declining level of labor force participation rates. And you can see on the far right, we've spiked even lower during the pandemic. The pandemic has been incredibly disruptive to the workforce and has been bodes very poorly for long-term growth in the US economy. Again, it's not every year, but we're going to have a big bounce back as we come out of the pandemic. But over the long term, our growth is constrained because we are losing workers. The pandemic caused problems with women who, not exclusively women, but primarily women who left the workforce in order to care for children who couldn't physically go to school. We have big disruptions from workers who work, say, in retail, who no longer have those jobs, and some of those won't return. And yes, there are new jobs at the Amazon warehouses and distribution facilities, but those might not be the same skill set, the same physical capability, or even the same geography. So we have a problem ahead. And it's not someone else's problem, it's all of our problem, because we all benefit from a more robust economy. But there's a potential solution. And the solution that we think is one of the most hopeful from a purely economic standpoint, to say nothing of the societal impacts, is taking a look at the people who have been impacted in their ability to participate in the economy because of a mistake of the past. There are a lot of ways of measuring this. I tend to focus in on that green bar there. 19 million Americans have a felony conviction. It's quite telling, of course, that of those with a felony conviction, fewer than half were convicted of a crime of such threat to public safety, it even required a prison sentence. So the rest had some combination of perhaps a jail stay, or perhaps just probation, or perhaps a fine, or time served. There's all sorts of variations. But the point is that a felony conviction is a huge barrier to reemployment, but may not really tell you very much about the individual, even at the time of commission of crime, let alone today. We flip this. We look at this as not just a problem. We know it's a problem for our society, but we look at it as an opportunity. And people who are justice involved, we don't see as a burden, we see them as a resource. Now, it's a big number. 19 million is a huge number. A million plus are still incarcerated, but 95% of those will be out. Some have aged out of the workforce, but many are working among this 19 million. But I'd venture to say that none of them, because of the incredible barriers to people with records, none of them have the labor force mobility to participate as fully in the economy as their talents and potential would allow. So this is a real resource for the US economy. But it's important to understand it's not just the numbers of people who are justice involved. From the employer standpoint, it's not quantity as much as fit and quality. And in our research, traveling around the country, meeting employers who have successful fair chance or second chance hiring programs, we found that there is a pathway for the business community to tapping into this talent resource. And it requires a partnership between a knowledgeable private sector employer, between critically nonprofits, as well as, in many cases, better government policies and sometimes even direct government support. Essentially, businesses who want to take advantage of this opportunity need to do so by creating processes, and I know Lauren and others have spoken about this, where you need to partner with people who can tell you who's truly ready for employment, and then processes that allow those employees to thrive. Now, if you're an employer listening today, and I talk about accommodations like that, that sounds complicated and expensive. But think about all the money we as employers invest in talent pipelines. whether sending recruiters to college campuses, whether providing all sorts of benefits for, say, working parents, which is a very productive area of investment. All of these should be thought of as an investment, and investments have a return. When you have a refined, smart, fair chance or second chance hiring program, you have a very high return on this investment. And it manifests itself. It's visible in two ways. People with a criminal record who are given the opportunity to succeed tend to be very engaged employees. They know what this opportunity means, and they tend to be very, very hard workers, very loyal to their employers. That loyalty translates into low turnover rates. There are direct savings to employers, as any employer listening knows, to low turnover. But that combination of engagement and low turnover is also the recipe for productivity. And again, I go back to that first growth chart that showed the components are growing your workforce and growing their productivity. With people with records, bringing them into the workforce, when you do it the right way, you get both benefits. You grow your workforce and you grow the productivity of your workforce. This is not an academic model. This is based upon real life experience. And employers no longer have the luxury of not considering this. It's simply too large. And we also are entering a time period where the millennial generation is largely all in the workforce. We continue to lose the baby boomers to retirement. And simply because of US birth rates, there's just not that huge wave to enter the workforce behind the millennials. To make matters worse from the employer standpoint, we believe we're heading for a labor shortage very quickly in the US. You're already feeling it in certain sectors like manufacturing, but we think it's really across the board. Every industry can use real talent, and this is a pool of real talent. One new change for those of you who are students of the market and follow things like the Federal Reserve, our central bank that sets interest rate policy, if you've been an employer through several business cycles, you really have learned not to worry too much about tight labor markets because they go away. The labor markets get tight, wages go up, and generally that's the sign that the Federal Reserve Bank starts tightening interest rates and slows the demand for labor. So tight labor markets don't persist. Back in September of last year, the Federal Reserve adopted what they're calling their new monetary policy framework. This is usually interpreted as a commitment to keeping rates lower for longer, but it's something much more important. The Fed, for the first time in its 100+ year history, is talking about the importance of what they are calling broad and inclusive employment. This is a central bank that wants to keep labor markets red hot. It's often been said the Fed is the chaperone that takes away the punch bowl just as the party gets started. Not this Fed. This Fed is not only leaving the punch bowl on the table, it's spiking the punch. What this means from the standpoint of employers is tight labor markets will persist, not just for a couple months in the past or a couple quarters, they can persist for years on end. And the companies which learn to tap the full potential of our workforce, very much including justice-involved individuals, have a first mover advantage from this. Now, I do understand, and this is my last slide, and then I'm hoping there may be some questions in chat, or Ken, I'm sure, may have some himself. Not everyone is ready to jump in. This is not, if you're a business owner listening or a business executive, please understand this is not a binary decision. Either you do it or you don't. You can take incremental steps to understand this opportunity and to understand where it might be a fit for your company. Let me start with the concept of low-risk hires. Someone who's been out of, say, incarceration for 5 years and has had steady employment and has stable housing and transportation, there is nothing different. There is no need for accommodation for this kind of employee. This is just another person in the talent pool. Now, I will say, if they are a returning citizen, you might have difficulty extracting them from their existing employer because of the loyalty factor. But this is a group that you should treat like no other employee. That means if they have a blemish perhaps in the viewpoint of a background check, or something comes up that shows they have a criminal record, let's not even call it a blemish. Don't treat them any differently. Don't use that as something that is a negative. It's really not. This is someone who has rebuilt their life. That's a sign of determination and character that makes for an admirable employee. I think it's important to educate yourself on the criminal justice system. There are all sorts of ways to do that. Of course, one of the best ways is to carefully examine the backgrounds and make sure you're understanding full circumstances and understand how people can end up with a felony conviction. There are great books on this. I just read Reuben Miller's Halfway Home, talks about collateral consequences, but there's great books on the misdemeanor system, such as Punishment Without Crime from Alexandra Nadapoff. I also like, there's a Twitter feed called Crime a Day, where a lawyer in Hartford, Connecticut pulls out one absurdity after the other from the federal code of how you can end up with a felony conviction. It's a lot easier than you think, and a lot less fair than you might think. It's really important to meet with companies like a Checkr and like others who have been pioneers in second chance hiring. Learn from their experience. In most cases, they are very willing to share. Checkr, of course, has gone that extra mile and has put out a playbook for potential employers. But learn from the experience of others. They have got models that work. You can see them. You can ask questions. Most of them are very, very willing to share. Connect with nonprofit partners. I know Lauren was talking about that before. This is critical. Understand how they can partner with you to help create a talent pipeline that fits your needs. And then even if you're not willing to go that far, take a look at vendor restrictions your company may have. You may not yet be ready to have someone with a conviction in your workforce, but what do you care about the person who is building your extension or does your landscaping at your office park, or does the electrical or HVAC within your facility? Very often there are these outdated restrictions that prevent vendors who may be second chance, fair chance employers from bringing someone to your site. These are rarely well thought out restrictions. It's time to review those and make sure we're not burdening those companies that are willing to become fair chance employers. We all have this interest in robust fair chance hiring to grow our economy. And then one final one I always like to bring up is I've had some meetings with people who have a conviction that their employer does not know about and work for companies where, should that conviction come to light, they would be automatically terminated. In some cases, these are people who have contributed to companies for 20 or 25 years, helped build those companies, and yet live in fear every day that a conviction, an old conviction, which hasn't stood in the way of their contribution, might come to light. And it's simply not fair. We should offer amnesty to existing employees if your firm happens to have some kind of ban against employees with convictions. With that, I'd be delighted to see if there are any questions in the chat or any from Ken or anyone else on the call.
Sure. Thank you for that, Jeff. Amazing work. You're a pioneer. It's refreshing to me to hear somebody like you from the business community to talk about fair chance hiring and this talent pool. Most of the time it's advocates on this side that are speaking about this issue. So it adds another layer of credibility to the business world when someone like yourself has spent so much time and effort championing this cause. So we do have a question in the chat. Jerry Goodstein asks, should we consider another domain as part of the Second Chance Society, the American public, along with employers, government, and nonprofit organizations? What role can or should the American public play in supporting this movement towards a second chance society?
That's a great question. So thank you, Jerry. For one, public advocacy for better criminal justice laws. I don't get closely involved with policy, except to point out that one very strong area of policy change would be examining policies that disrupt people's ability to work. The old paradigm for looking at this was you were either tough on crime or you were soft on crime. We should be pro-public safety, and being pro-public safety means we should foster criminal justice policies that support people's continued employment. A great example of this is cash bail. Cash bail disproportionately impacts poorer people and tends to disrupt their track record of employment. If someone can't make bail, and remember, these are people who are innocent, innocent until proven guilty, can't make bail, disrupts their employment, they can lose their job, they get a shakier track record of employment. States like Illinois just eliminated cash bail. We need more states to adopt that. It doesn't mean, again, public safety is important. It doesn't mean that everyone who is arrested is released until trial. It means those who pose little or no threat to public safety should not have their lives disrupted at this point. So that's one example of public understanding that it's not tough on crime versus soft on crime. That's not the trade-off. That's not how it works, and advocating for this. I also think it's important for the public is also a consumer. And one of the many things that employers tend to fear about hiring people with records is reputation risk. And this really has two aspects to it. One is a safety risk. Will people think this is unsafe to come to my place of business or for other employees to work at? And, it's important if you're an employer and become a second chance employer that you stress that this is still a safe workplace. That doesn't mean you only consider nonviolent criminal records. There are people who've been convicted of crimes of violence who are not violent people, at least certainly not today when they're considered for employment. But it does mean you do have to address this issue head on. More corrosive, I think, is this perception that if I'm known as an employer of people with records, people will believe I offer a low quality product. And that is simply dead wrong. My friend Rob Perez started a bakery cafe in Lexington, Kentucky, and it had a very slow start. He hires, I think 23 of his original 24 employees were people who had come from halfway houses, mostly for addiction-related issues. And Rob said he had a really tough time. People wouldn't come to a restaurant. And I said, was it a safety fear? He said, no, they thought second chance meant second rate. And it was only once they started getting lots and lots of 5-star Yelp reviews, and actually are one of the highest rated restaurants of its kind in the country, did people realize that. So it's important that we, as the public, as consumers, let our voice be heard, that we expect the companies we do business with or the employers we work for to be involved in solving societal problems, breaking this terrible cycle we've created of incarceration and inability to rehabilitate because of lack of employment. I think consumers have to make it clear this is an area they would view positively of the companies they do business with.
Appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you. I had another question. We've touched today a little bit about employer development. We heard from Lauren and we heard from you about the business case for employers to hire fair chance talent. And we've also talked a little bit about policy. I think it's important to ask the question about what responsibility do justice-involved people have in reference to talent development and bringing the necessary value proposition to enter the conversation, because I don't think anybody in the industry is asking or wants a charity job. I think that oftentimes we don't have the conversation about what responsibility do we have as justice-involved people to bring to the employer. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, well, first of all, you should know that I believe in this so strongly. I'm working, a philanthropist in Philadelphia has purchased 500 books to distribute to prisons around the country so that people who are currently incarcerated, and my book actually starts out with the first section of the book is not a foreword, it's a note to the currently incarcerated. And it has to do with realistic expectations. Justice-involved individuals have to recognize that this is a challenge. The only thing, unless you can position yourself differently, the only thing that an employer will know about you is your worst moment. And so it's very important that you have a clear message to show that you are not going to be in the position you were that got you justice involved, and that you have shown growth and capability. I have a chapter, for instance, on reentry that talks about all the formidable barriers, because I want employers to understand that someone who's come out of incarceration, say, and is now a job applicant with a computerized application and housing and documentation and transportation needs, is actually someone who's overcome considerable hurdles and is actually a person of determination and character. Make it easier. So, the great thing about looking at people who have gone and furthered their education is that's a sign, a signal to employers. This is someone who is rebuilding their life. This is someone who's determined to move forward. Certificates of each state has calls them a little differently, so forgive me. But certificates of rehabilitation are available in most states. They're proof. Educational attainment is a tremendous degree, example of showing that you are ready to rebuild your life, and helping employers see concrete examples of things you've done. I also think, and now it's a little bit different because this is more targeted towards people who are pursuing education, but sometimes you need to partner with nonprofits. Some businesses do use nonprofit workforce development and re-entry organizations as a de facto screening. So make it easy on the employer. Partner with people who can attest to your character, show that you are moving forward with your life in productive ways. All of those makes it easier for the employer to reposition you as, gee, this is someone who is climbing mountains. That's the kind of person I want on my team.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Before we go, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, can you please tell everybody when your book's coming out and where they can pre-order the book? I can't wait to read the book, and I would encourage everybody, whether you're an employer or an advocate or somebody that's formerly incarcerated, to read this book. It's a great business case, Jeff.
So this old guy had to learn how to create a QR code, and hopefully it works. But my website has links to the book, jeffcorzanick.com/books. I'm the only Jeff Corzanick on the planet, so I'm easy to find, even if you don't spell it right the first time. The book is being released April 13th. I will say that it is available for pre-orders now. If you, like me, believe this is a mission to build a better America through giving people opportunity, if you are going to buy it eventually, I'd ask you to consider a pre-order. Pre-orders send a signal to booksellers and to reviewers that this is a topic worth highlighting. So thank you.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Everybody go out and pre-order that book. Now we're going to pass over to the individual responsible for organizing this event, the incomparable Damani Fisher. You want to tell us about what we have next week?
Incomparable. Thanks, Ken. I don't know about that, but thank you so much, Jeff. I look forward to reading your book. Everyone, please get your pre-order your copy now. Thanks to all the participants who joined us today. Remember, we have a third webinar a week from today, and that third webinar will be, we're calling that third webinar a deep dive. Our goal is to take a deeper dive into fair chance hiring and employer questions and concerns. We will have breakout sessions that will allow folks to, if folks have a desire to go more in depth on a particular topic that we've discussed over the past two webinars, we will give you that opportunity. In fact, I believe Carrie is going to put up a link that will allow you to actually, choose what topics you'd like to explore more in depth. So you'll notice that there's a ban the box. Oh, it's a poll. I'm sorry, it's a poll. So if you want to learn more about ban the box, recruiting, onboarding, how to create a more inclusive work environment, gaining support in your company, career services professionals, engaging employers, or if there's another topic that you would like to explore, please let us know. Once again, thanks to all of our guests, Jeff Corzanick, Dr. Lucretia Murphy, sorry. And of course, our teammate, our very own Lauren Bell from Checkr. Thank you so very much. And we look forward to seeing everyone, hopefully, a week from today, same time, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Untapped Talent, diversifying through fair chance hiring. Once again, thank you so very much for your participation.